April 12, 1943. 20,000 feet above Saint-Omer, occupied France. Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland of Jagdgeschwader 26 banked his Focke-Wulf 190 sharply to the right, desperately trying to shake the American fighter on his tail. His aircraft, one of the most advanced fighters in the Luftwaffe arsenal, had always given him a sense of invulnerability. That feeling was now shattered as streams of tracer fire ripped past his canopy. "Mein Gott," he muttered, throwing the FW-190 into a violent split S maneuver. "So many tracers! How many guns does this American have?" The answer was 8. 8 50-caliber machine guns mounted in the wings of the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt that pursued him. 8 guns capable of firing 160 rounds per second, delivering 13 pounds of high-velocity bullets in a single devastating burst. Galland pulled out of his dive and risked a glance backward. The massive American fighter was still there, closing the distance. He knew that a single 1-second burst from that aircraft could tear his FW-190 apart. "Achtung, Indianer!" he warned his squadron mates over the radio, using the Luftwaffe code word for P-47s. "These are not the usual Americans. Their firepower is overwhelming." As Galland eventually escaped into cloud cover, his damaged aircraft limping back to base with over 50 bullet holes in its fuselage and one engine cowling nearly torn away, he had experienced a pivotal moment in the air war over Europe. The realization that German fighters were outgunned by the American newcomers. This encounter represented the collision of two industrial philosophies. German aircraft design emphasized technical sophistication and precision engineering. American design prioritized standardization, mass production, and practical combat effectiveness. Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of the famous Luftwaffe General Adolf Galland, was among the first to recognize the implications. After landing his damaged FW-190, he immediately called his brother at Luftwaffe headquarters. "The Americans have something new," he reported. "A fighter with firepower unlike anything we've faced. 8 heavy machine guns, all 50 calibers. When they all fire together, it's like facing a wall of bullets. Our pilots won't stand a chance if caught in their sights, even briefly." The arrival of this new threat could not have come at a worse time for the Luftwaffe. By spring 1943, Germany was already fighting a defensive air war over Western Europe, with increasingly inexperienced pilots facing growing Allied numerical superiority. Planning and Expectations, January 3, 1942. Republic Aviation Corporation, Farmingdale, New York. Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's chief designer, stood before a large technical drawing of his P-47 Thunderbolt fighter. The aircraft represented a radical departure from conventional fighter design. Larger, heavier, and more heavily armed than any single-engine fighter in history. "Gentlemen, this is not merely an improved fighter," Kartveli explained. "This is a completely new concept. A high-altitude interceptor and escort with the structural strength, engine power, and armament to dominate the skies over Europe." At the heart of Kartveli's design was the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine delivering 2,000 horsepower. But the most revolutionary aspect was its armament. 8 50-caliber machine guns when other fighters carried 4 or 6 at most. Colonel Howard Davis, representing the Army Air Force, raised a concern. "The Germans rely heavily on cannon armament in their fighters. Are we certain that machine guns alone, even 8 of them, will be sufficient against heavily armored German aircraft?" Kartveli's response reflected American tactical thinking. A 20-millimeter cannon fires perhaps 15 rounds per second with relatively poor accuracy. Our 850 calibers will deliver more than 130 rounds per second with exceptional accuracy. More hits equal more damage, regardless of individual projectile size. This philosophy represented a distinctly American approach, emphasizing volume of fire, accuracy, and reliability over larger caliber weapons. American factories could produce 50 caliber Brownings and their ammunition in virtually unlimited quantities, while cannon production was more complex and limited. Meanwhile, at Luftwaffe headquarters in Berlin, General Adolf Galland, Inspector of Fighters, addressed a gathering of fighter group commanders with a very different perspective. "Our intelligence indicates the Americans are developing new fighter types," Galland informed them, "but we have several advantages they cannot overcome. Our pilots are combat experienced. Our aircraft, particularly the FW-190, represent the pinnacle of fighter design. And most importantly, our cannon armament gives us a decisive edge in firepower." Major Walter Oesau, commanding Jagdgeschwader 1, shared this confidence. "American industry may produce many aircraft, but quality will always triumph over quantity. Our FW-190 can outmaneuver any American fighter, and our cannon can destroy them before their machine guns become effective." The disparity in production capabilities was already apparent. Republic Aviation was tooling up for mass production that would eventually deliver 15,600 P-47s. Focke-Wulf would produce approximately 20,000 FW-190 fighters of all variants throughout the entire war. Colonel Hubert Zemke, who would command the 56th Fighter Group equipped with the first P-47s in England, understood the implications. "We're bringing a new kind of firepower to this fight. The Germans have been winning through superior training and tactics. We'll win through superior firepower and production capacity." Intelligence and Preparations. November 12, 1942. 8th Air Force Headquarters, High Wycombe, England. Brigadier General Frank O'Driscoll Hunter, commander of 8th Fighter Command, studied the large wall map showing Luftwaffe fighter dispositions across northern Europe. "The first P-47 group arrives next month," Hunter told his intelligence officer, Major Harold Willis. "How much do the Germans know about what's coming their way?" Willis consulted his files. "Surprisingly little, sir. German intelligence reports we've intercepted mention a new American fighter, but they seem to be expecting something similar to the P-38 Lightning or the P-51. They have no specific information about the P-47's capabilities or armament. This intelligence gap would prove critical." The Luftwaffe had developed effective tactics against the 4-gun Spitfires and 6-gun P-38s they had faced previously. They had no doctrine for countering an aircraft with the P-47's unprecedented concentration of firepower. Major Willis continued, "The Germans are currently focused on defending against our bomber formations. Their fighter tactics emphasize attacking the bombers rather than engaging our escort fighters. This should give the P-47s opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities before the Germans can adapt." On the American side, preparations for the P-47's combat debut were intensive. The 56th Fighter Group, commanded by Colonel Hubert Zemke, had been selected as the first unit to operate the new fighter. "The key to success with this aircraft is fire discipline," Zemke instructed his squadron commanders. "With 8 guns, the temptation will be to open fire at maximum range. This wastes ammunition and reduces effectiveness. We'll train our pilots to close to 300 yards or less before firing, ensuring maximum concentration of bullets on target." The Thunderbolt's 8 guns were harmonized to converge their fire at 250 yards, the distance at which all 8 guns would be hitting the same point in space. This convergence pattern created a lethal cone of fire, within which no aircraft could survive even momentary exposure. Meanwhile, at Luftwaffe bases across northern France, German pilots and ground crews were making their own preparations, unaware of the specific threat they would soon face. At Abbeville, Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland supervised pre-flight checks of his squadron's FW-190s. Allied fighter escorts have been increasing in number and aggression, he told his pilots, but our aircraft remain superior. Maintain energy in combat, use our roll rate advantage, and remember that our cannon give us the edge in firepower. A single 20mm shell can bring down an enemy fighter. What neither Galland nor his pilots realized was that the tactical equation was about to change dramatically. The P-47's 8-gun battery would deliver more weight of fire in 1 second than an FW-190 could deliver in 5. By January 1943, the 56th Fighter Group had completed its movement to Halesworth Airfield in Suffolk, England. Ground crews trained intensively on maintaining the complex 8-gun system. Each P-47 squadron of 16 aircraft required more than 50,000 rounds of 50-caliber ammunition for a single mission. Opening actions, March 4, 1943. 10 miles west of Antwerp, Belgium. 22,000 feet. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin of the 56th Fighter Group squinted through his gun sight at the distant specks of German fighters rising to intercept an American bomber formation. His P-47 Thunderbolt was one of 16 escorting B-17 flying fortresses returning from a raid on marshalling yards near Hamm, Germany. Zemke's Wolf Pack, bandits at 2 o'clock high, he called over the radio. Looks like 190s climbing to intercept the bombers. Roger that, came Colonel Zemke's calm reply. Blue section take high cover. Red section follow me down. Below, Oberleutnant Hans Joachim Marseille of Jagdgeschwader 26 was leading 12 FW-190s toward the bomber formation. An experienced combat pilot with over 100 victories, Marseille was following standard doctrine. Form up in pairs, he instructed his pilots. Standard attack pattern. Hit the bombers from astern, break away, and re-attack. Ignore escort fighters unless directly threatened. The first indication of something different came when Marseille spotted unusual contrails high above his formation. Achtung! Fighter escorts at high altitude, 2 o'clock. Continue mission, but be alert. Seconds later, Zemke's 8 P-47s tipped into their attack dive, rapidly accelerating to over 400 miles per hour. The P-47's weight, a disadvantage in climbing and turning, became an asset in the dive. Marseille recognized the unfamiliar silhouettes too late. Break right! New type of fighter incoming! The German formation scattered, but 3 FW-190s were caught by surprise. Captain Mahurin selected a target and pressed his gun button momentarily. All 8 50-caliber Brownings erupted simultaneously, sending streams of tracers toward the German fighter. The effect was immediate and devastating. Where German pilots were accustomed to seeing 4 or 6 machine gun tracers from Allied fighters, they now faced a virtual wall of fire. Mahurin's target took more than 30 hits in less than half a second of firing. The FW-190 shuddered violently as multiple 50-caliber rounds tore through the engine cowling, cockpit, and wing roots. Smoke poured from the damaged engine, and the right wing folded upward as its main spar was severed by the heavy bullets. The aircraft rolled inverted and plunged earthward, breaking apart before the pilot could bail out. Across the formation, similar scenes played out. The German pilots, caught by surprise and unaware of the P-47's capabilities, suffered 4 losses in the initial pass, without scoring a single hit on the American fighters. Marseille, displaying the situational awareness that had made him an ace, managed to evade the initial attack and turned hard to engage an American fighter that overshot him. He lined up his gun sights and fired a burst from his two 13mm machine guns and two 20mm cannon, expecting to see his target disintegrate. To his shock, the American fighter absorbed the hits and continued flying, its massive radial engine providing some protection against frontal attacks. The P-47 banked away, smoking slightly, but clearly still combat-capable. "Their aircraft can take punishment," Marseille called to his remaining pilots. "Aim carefully and use cannon only at close range." For 20 minutes, the aerial ballet continued. The FW-190s held the edge in turning radius and low-speed handling, while the P-47s dominated in diving speed, high-altitude performance, and, most critically, firepower. When the Germans, low on fuel and ammunition, attempted to disengage, the P-47s pursued relentlessly. 3 more German fighters were shot down during the withdrawal, bringing American claims for the day to 8 confirmed and 3 probables, against the loss of just 1 P-47. As the Americans reformed, Captain Mahurin radioed Colonel Zemke. "Sir, did you see how they came apart when hit? Those 850s are something else." "That's exactly what we trained for," Zemke replied. "Volume of fire trumps individual hitting power." Back at Abbeville Airfield, the returning German pilots reported their shocking experience to intelligence officers. Oberleutnant Marseille was particularly eloquent. "These new American fighters have firepower unlike anything we've faced," he reported. "When they open fire, it's not individual tracers, but a solid stream of bullets. My aircraft took at least 7 hits in a fraction of a second. Against such concentrated fire, our previous tactics are suicide." Colonel Zemko, reviewing the combat reports, recognized that this initial success would soon lead to German adaptation. "They'll change tactics once they understand what they're facing," he told his squadron commanders. This prediction proved accurate. Over the following month, as more P-47 groups entered combat, German tactics evolved toward avoiding sustained engagements with the heavily armed American fighters. But the psychological impact of those initial encounters could not be undone. German fighter pilots, who had entered 1943 confident in the superiority of their aircraft and armament, now faced the unsettling realization that they were outgunned by the newcomers from America. The critical moment, May 11, 1943. Luftwaffe headquarters, Berlin, Germany. General Adolf Galland studied the combat reports spread across his desk with growing concern. The statistics were unmistakable. Luftwaffe fighter losses against the Americans had increased by 63% since the introduction of the P-47 Thunderbolt 3 months earlier. "This cannot be explained by numerical superiority alone," Galland told his operations staff. "The reports all mention the same thing: the devastating firepower of 850 caliber guns. We are fundamentally outgunned." Major Walter Oesau, recently recalled from frontline duty to assist with tactical development, pointed to a diagram showing bullet strike patterns from a recovered FW-190 that had somehow survived an encounter with a P-47. "Look at this concentration," Oesau noted grimly. 47 hits in a 1-meter square area, delivered in less than 1 second of firing. Our aircraft simply cannot withstand this. The structural integrity fails catastrophically when hit by such concentrated fire. This realization marked the critical moment when the Luftwaffe High Command understood they were facing not just another fighter, but the manifestation of America's industrial might in its most lethal form. The P-47's 8-gun battery represented mass production applied directly to aerial warfare, standardized, simplified, and multiplied to overwhelming effect. Galland called in Dr. Kurt Tank, chief designer of the Focke-Wulf Company and creator of the FW-190. Tank examined the combat reports with the analytical mind of an engineer. "We cannot match this firepower directly," Tank concluded. "Our production capacity cannot support equipping our fighters with 8 weapons. We must adapt tactically while seeking technical countermeasures." The most disturbing aspect of the situation was the industrial mathematics. A single Republic aviation factory in Farmingdale, New York, was producing P-47s at a rate of 1 aircraft every 4 hours, each with 8 50 caliber machine guns. Germany's entire aviation industry, stretched across multiple factories under constant bombing, could not match this production rate even for simpler aircraft with fewer weapons. Ammunition production showed an even greater disparity. American factories were producing over 20 million rounds of 50 caliber ammunition monthly, enough to supply 300 rounds per gun for every P-47 mission. German factories, hampered by material shortages and bombing, struggled to produce 5 million rounds of all calibers combined. Major Johannes Steinhoff, a decorated ace who had faced P-47s over France, articulated the psychological impact. "When you see those 8 streams of tracers coming toward you, something fundamental changes in your understanding of the war. This is not merely a better fighter. It is America's industrial superiority, made manifest in the most direct way possible." For the first time, many in the Luftwaffe leadership fully grasped what they were truly fighting against. Not just the Allied air forces, but the entire American industrial complex. No tactical brilliance or pilot skill could overcome such fundamental material disparities. The critical moment extended beyond headquarters to the frontline squadrons. At Saint-Omer Airfield, Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland briefed his pilots on new defensive tactics specifically designed to counter the P-47's firepower. "Never allow them a sustained firing opportunity," he instructed. "Brake hard the instant they begin firing. Their 8 guns give them an overwhelming advantage in any extended engagement. We must hit and run, relying on our superior turning performance to escape their firing cone." This tactical adaptation, essentially an admission of firepower inferiority, represented a profound shift in Luftwaffe fighter doctrine. German pilots, trained to aggressively press home attacks, were now being instructed to prioritize survival and disengagement when facing the heavily armed American fighters. The revelation about American industrial capability extended beyond the specific threat of the P-47. As one Luftwaffe intelligence officer noted in a May 19th report, "If the Americans can produce fighters with twice the firepower of our best aircraft, what else might their factories be capable of?" This is not merely a tactical challenge, but a strategic one that may prove insurmountable. Immediate aftermath and perspective. June through August 1943. European Theater of Operations. The immediate aftermath of the Luftwaffe's realization about the P-47's firepower advantage was a period of rapid adaptation on both sides. German fighter units implemented new defensive tactics, emphasizing hit-and-run attacks and avoiding sustained engagements with the American fighters. Oberstleutnant Egon Mayer, commanding Jagdgeschwader II, developed what became known as the Mayer Weave, a defensive maneuver specifically designed to counter the P-47's firepower advantage by never presenting a predictable target. His pilots were trained to constantly change direction and attitude, making it difficult for the Americans to establish the momentary firing solution needed for their 8-gun battery to be effective. "We cannot match them gun for gun," Mayer told his pilots, "but we can deny them the opportunity to bring their superior firepower to bear." This tactical adaptation was partially successful. Luftwaffe loss rates stabilized somewhat by late June, though they remained significantly higher than before the P-47's introduction. The German pilots had found ways to survive against the heavily armed American fighters, but at the cost of offensive effectiveness. From the American perspective, the impact of the P-47's firepower was immediately apparent in combat reports and gun camera footage. Captain Robert S. Johnson of the 56th Fighter Group, who would become one of the top P-47 aces, described the effect in a letter home. "When all 8 guns fire together, it's like pointing a garden hose of destruction. German fighters literally come apart when hit squarely. Wings separate, cockpits disintegrate, engines tear free from mounts. This isn't just damaging enemy aircraft, it's destroying them beyond any possibility of repair." Technical analysis confirmed this impression. Ordnance experts calculated that a 1-second burst from a P-47 delivered approximately 13 pounds of bullets to the target, more than twice the weight of fire from any other Allied fighter, and approximately 4 times the weight of fire from a FW-190s machine guns in the same time period. Colonel Hubert Zemke observed the psychological impact on his own pilots. "The confidence that comes with such firepower transforms how our pilots engage the enemy. They know they need only a momentary firing opportunity to achieve a kill. This creates an aggressiveness that further compounds our advantage." For German pilots, the psychological impact was the inverse. Luftwaffe pilot diaries and letters from this period reveal an increasing fatalism about engaging American fighters. Lieutenant Franz Steigler of JG-27 wrote in his combat diary, "When you see those 8 streams of tracers, you know that even the briefest exposure means death. We fly now with constant awareness of our vulnerability." The industrial implications became increasingly apparent as the summer of 1943 progressed. While damaged P-47s were quickly replaced, German fighter strength steadily declined despite the Luftwaffe's best efforts. By August, the Jagdgeschwader defending France and the Low Countries were at less than 60% of authorized strength, with many aircraft operating with reduced armament due to spare parts shortages. Major Werner Mülders, one of the Luftwaffe's most respected tactical innovators, captured the fundamental realization in a memorandum to the Air Ministry. "We are not merely fighting against Allied pilots or even Allied aircraft. We are fighting against Allied factories. This is a contest of production capacity that becomes more unfavorable for us with each passing month." Strategic consequences. September 1943 through April 1944. European Air War. The strategic consequences of America's firepower advantage manifested most clearly in the changing dynamics of the bombing campaign. Before the P-47's arrival, German fighters could attack American bomber formations with relative impunity once they pushed past the limited range of existing escort fighters. By late 1943, this was no longer the case. The P-47, with its combination of range and firepower, could escort bombers to targets deep inside Germany. When Luftwaffe interceptors rose to meet them, they faced not just any escort fighters, but the most heavily armed single-engine fighters in the world. Brigadier General Fred Anderson, commander of the 8th Bomber Command, noted the transformation. "The P-47 has changed the fundamental equation of our bombing campaign. German fighters no longer freely engage our bomber formations. They must first deal with escorts that can outgun them. This has reduced our loss rates dramatically." The statistics confirmed this assessment. In October 1943, before widespread P-47 escort was available, 8th Air Force bomber loss rates averaged 12% on deep penetration raids. By March 1944, with full P-47 escort, loss rates had dropped to under 7% despite increases in German fighter strength. On the German side, the strategic consequences were even more profound. The Luftwaffe was forced to commit increasingly scarce resources to counter the P-47 threat. armoring of fighter aircraft was increased, reducing performance. Production priorities shifted toward heavier fighters that might survive the American fighter's firepower, further reducing numerical output. Generaloberst Hans Jaschonek, chief of the Luftwaffe General Staff, summarized the dilemma in a February 1944 assessment: "We face an impossible situation. To survive against the Americans' 8-gun fighters, our aircraft must be more heavily armored. Yet this armor reduces performance and increases production time, meaning we fall further behind numerically. Each adaptation to American firepower advantage worsens our overall position." Perhaps the most significant strategic consequence was the accelerated development of the German jet fighter program. The Me-262 jet fighter, capable of speeds over 500 miles per hour, was seen as the ultimate answer to the P-47 threat. An aircraft fast enough to choose when and where to engage, negating the American firepower advantage through superior maneuverability. Hitler himself, after reviewing reports on P-47 firepower effectiveness, ordered the highest priority for jet fighter production in August 1943. But this strategic decision, while technically sound, further strained Germany's already overextended production capacity. Resources diverted to the jet program reduced conventional fighter output, precisely when they were most needed against the growing American threat. The true strategic impact of the P-47's 850 calibers extended beyond the immediate air war to affect German war production broadly. Factories had to be dispersed and moved underground to escape the bombers now effectively escorted by the heavily armed fighters. This dispersion reduced production efficiency by an estimated 30%, creating a downward spiral of diminishing output precisely when increased production was desperately needed. Field Marshal Erhard Milch, in charge of German aircraft production, captured this strategic quandary. The Americans have created a situation where we must simultaneously increase fighter production while dispersing and protecting the very factories that produce those fighters. Their 8-gun fighters escort the bombers that force us to disperse production, which in turn makes it impossible to match their production rates. By early 1944, the strategic consequences had become self-reinforcing. Fewer German fighters meant less opposition to American bomber formations, which meant more effective bombing of German industry, which further reduced fighter production. At the center of this cycle was the P-47 Thunderbolt and its devastating battery of 850 caliber machine guns. Epilogue: May 8, 1945. Farmingdale, New York. Republic Aviation Factory. As workers celebrated victory in Europe, production line supervisor Michael Doherty walked the floor of the massive factory where P-47s had been built at a peak rate of 1 aircraft every 3 hours during the war's height. Over 15,000 of the massive fighters had rolled out of this and other Republic factories, each armed with those devastating 850 caliber machine guns. "It wasn't just an airplane we built here," Doherty told a visiting reporter. "It was America's industrial might, in physical form. Every Thunderbolt that left this factory carried 8 guns because we could make them that way. Because our factories could produce the guns, the ammunition, and the aircraft to carry them in numbers the enemy couldn't match." This perspective captured the essential truth about the P-47 and its unprecedented firepower. The 8-gun battery represented more than a tactical advantage. It symbolized the fundamental industrial disparity between the United States and Nazi Germany. America could mass-produce heavily armed fighters in numbers that Germany could neither match nor effectively counter. The long-term significance extended beyond World War II to shape military aviation development for decades. The lesson that firepower concentration could overcome performance disadvantages influenced fighter design through the jet age. America's philosophy of standardization, mass production, and firepower multiplication became cornerstones of Western military doctrine. For the German pilots who had faced the P-47's 8 guns, the experience left indelible impressions that shaped their understanding of why Germany lost the air war. Erich Hartmann, the war's highest-scoring fighter ace with 352 victories, reflected in a 1975 interview, "We had excellent aircraft and superbly trained pilots, but we were fighting not just the Allied air forces, but the entire American industrial system." When you faced a P-47 and saw 8 gun muzzles pointing at you, you were seeing American factory capacity in its most direct form. No amount of pilot skill could overcome such material advantages indefinitely. The P-47 Thunderbolt and its 850 caliber machine guns thus stand as one of history's clearest examples of how industrial capacity translates directly into combat effectiveness. What began as a technical design choice, the multiplication of standardized weapons rather than development of more sophisticated ones, became the physical manifestation of America's decisive advantage in World War II. The ability to produce overwhelming quantities of effective weapons. General Jimmy Doolittle, who commanded the 8th Air Force during the critical air battles of 1944, perhaps best summarized the significance. The P-47's 8 guns didn't just shoot down German fighters. They shot down the entire concept that quality could overcome quantity. In modern industrial warfare, the nation that can deliver the most firepower to the battlefield will eventually prevail. For the Luftwaffe pilots who had entered 1943 confident in the superiority of their aircraft and tactics, the appearance of the 8-gun P-47 represented the moment when they fully comprehended what they were truly fighting against. Not just another air force, but the full industrial might of the United States. Their FW-190s were indeed outgunned, not just tactically, but strategically and industrially. In that realization lay the true significance of America's P-47 and its 850 caliber machine guns, the moment when